I'm Bob Darrell. I'm an alcoholic. Would you join me in a moment of silence? Open with a prayer. Lord, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, everything I think I know about myself, everything I think I know about others, and everything I think I know about this program, Recovery, all for a new experience in you, Lord, a new experience in myself, a new experience in my fellows, and a much needed new experience in this program, Recovery. Amen. That prayer has done me much good over the years because if you listen real closely, you'll hear the hinges of my mind start to close naturally over time as I puff up with everything I think I know. Yesterday we ended with step 9, and you know, we could go on the stories of step 9 and the transformations and in my own life and in the guys I sponsor. One of the things I really enjoy the most is getting guys crossing those, dealing with those, all that separation, mending that separation between them and getting even, and watching guys, that have been floundering for 20 years sober but not doing very well, and uncovering those last few amends, the financial ones that nobody knows they owe except the worst person knows. It's the one person that could unconsciously sabotage their life financially, and then they finally do the self-sacrifice and they pay that stuff back, and you just watch their life start to. It's almost like ballast in a hot air balloon. You throw it over the side and you get lift. And I love watching that. Same with relationships. I had a friend who's sober 40 years. He kept remarrying his ex-wife, and it would get worse. It was a progressive disease, and it would get worse every time, and until he finally realized he had never made amends to her for the stuff that it had happened at the end of the first time. And he'd done some, he was angry, of course, but no, there's no, bad behavior is bad behavior regardless of the excuse. And he never made amends. And then when he made amends, he got to stop remarrying her. It was like, this doesn't sound like much, but he was almost like he was compelled to it because he wasn't even, right? And it's pretty cool. And so what happens, though, and it happened to me, and it happens to a lot of guys I sponsor, there is a tremendous lift in just a very cool thing that happens to our very beings, our spirits, as a result of making these amends. And it's so, I think because I'm self-centered by nature, I think I have a tendency to judge how I'm doing by how I feel. Because as a self-centered person, I have a tendency to focus extremely on how I feel. So if I feel really good, I assume I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And that's such an erroneous perception. Because in truth, there have been times in my sobriety where I felt really good and I was doing really bad. And we all have those periods, because when you're living a life on self and self-gratification, in the beginning, before the wheels come off and the house of cards collapses, there is a lot of excitement, and it's like you're getting your way, you're maneuvering. It's just amazing until the wheels fall off. And in times like that, I went through a period. I'm not proud of it, but I went through a period that came to a head at about 19 years sober, with a terrible depression. And I hadn't been depressed since early sobriety anyway. And And it was baffling to me. And the reason it was baffling to me is my life externally was never better than it. I made deep seven figures that year. I ran out of things to buy. I mean, I had prestige, I had property, I had everything that you would imagine should like make you feel a little better, and it did getting it in the acquisition. And then when I had everything, that's when I started to sink into, and if you'd asked me during that early period of acquisition, how you doing? Oh man, I'm doing great. See my new Jag? I'm doing great. If you'd asked my sponsor at that time, he may have said something like, well, if he lives through this, he may help some people. Because he would have judged how I was doing, not on how I feel. He would have judged how I was doing on what I was doing. And I'd started, my primary purpose had focused, it shifted gradually onto me, and it stopped. Even though I was still going through some of the motions of a good AA member, because the ego, my ego, as it becomes more dominant, it still wants to enjoy the bragging rights of a good AA member and yet still be self-involved and self-focused and self. And that's what had happened. And then I went through a period, about 10 years ago, I went through a divorce, and divorces are tough. I'll tell you, there was a lot of property involved, and there's all kinds of stuff that where you can feel threatened. And there were times going through that where if you would have asked me how I was doing, based on how I felt, I very likely could have said to you, I'm not doing that good. I'm hanging in there, I'm staying sober, but I'm not doing that good. But you could ask my sponsor, he walked me through this, and if you'd ask him how I was doing, he would have said, Bob's doing really good. He's going through this divorce with some integrity, and he's being kind in the face of often adversarial stuff. He's calling me he's upped his calling me to several times a week rather than just once or twice. He's making his commitments at the detox, at his home group. He's being transparent. He's doing 12-step work. He would have based the assertion of how I was doing based on what I was doing. And in the big picture, that's the only thing that's real. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous is such an action program. It's not a feeling program. There's no chapter in the book into pondering. I mean, there's not. It's not. We don't suggest you go study yourself for a while. We're not into that. I mean, because we've learned painfully from our experience that doesn't work. We're narcissistically self-involved. I mean, for a narcissistically self-centered, selfish person to study themselves, that's like crazy. That's nuts. And so we look, but we don't stare. We look for areas that can be corrected, and that's what we're going to start talking about in step 10. And there's a lot of confusion. There was confusion in me about step 10, and there's a passage that's part of step 11. And it's part of step 11 because it follows the thing in italics that says step 11. There's a part in step 11 that looks like step 10, and a lot of people confuse it. It's the nightly review where you set things up for the realignment with God. But step 10, in actuality, if you follow the book, is like immediate. It's right now. Wilson, one of the things that Wilson realized over the years is that some of us we don't pay attention in our own lives to realize that it's time that I should stop here in the middle of this angst. One of the and do the 5 things that it talks about in step 10. And the reason is that, even though the book says pause when agitated, most of us attack when agitated. When we're the kind of people that drive faster when there's a speed bump coming up, like as if maybe we'll get a little air. Maybe we'll get a little air. You know what I mean? That's my nature. So pausing when agitated is often, I don't get that, because when I'm excited or agitated, I get the angst is just like it says earlier in the book, we're driven by 100 forms of fear. This stuff is a driving factor in my life often. So to train myself to do it, I don't always know when. And then Wilson, years later, in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, he described the road sign that lets you know you better stop and do these 5 things. And he says that he says it's a spiritual axiom, which an axiom, if you ever took geometry, is something that's true under all conditions. It's a spiritual axiom that when I'm disturbed at all, no matter what the reason, no matter at all, that there's something wrong with me. That's the road sign. Bob, you're out of line here. No, they are. No, Bob, you're out of line. No, they are. Bob, you're out of line because you're the one that's disturbed here. And you have to surrender and take care of this. And what do we do when we're disturbed or when we're angst or when we're agitated? Well, there's 5 things. First thing, it says, and this is right just below the middle of the page on 84, it talks about continuing to do these things as if this is has to become a working part of the mind. And one of the things I really push my sponsees to do, especially after they're sober a while, I think it always seems more effective. They have to start having problems in sobriety before they get diligent and really want to start doing some of this stuff. And so the first thing we do is we watch. Watch for what? Well, we watch for the resurgence and the manifestation of self. And we watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, symptomatic of the bondage of self. So we continue to watch. The second thing is we pray. We ask God to remove these things at once. We ask God at once to remove them. The third thing, transparency, we discuss them with someone immediately. And why would you have to do that? Because if you're in conflict with people or life itself or yourself, there's something usually that has to be mended, and I need my sponsor's objective vision. So I discuss this with someone immediately. If I can't get a hold of my sponsor, I have a network of people sober a long time that I talk to. We make amends quickly, which a couple months later, quickly. I don't know if you guys are any of you are as amends resistant as I am. I'm the kind of guy that would drive on a flat tire imagining that maybe it'll go away. You know what I mean? And what I've learned over the years by postponing amends, hoping that I don't have to make them, it's painful. The longer I wait, the more discomfort I have. And why should I? And I've done this. It's almost like I have to let the pain become so intense it breaks me before I'll go and make amends. And the thing is, you don't have to do that. Make amends quickly. But the ego hates it. And matter of fact, my resistance to making amends quickly is symptomatic of ego and self and selfishness. Me first, my feelings. I don't want to look bad. I don't want to lose face. All symptomatic. And I think a lot of my own recovery has come from times fueled by some discomfort where I've pushed myself aside and taken actions that I'm not inclined to take naturally, actions that I often naturally would resist taking. And then why would I do that? So that I can feel better ultimately and do better and be one with rather than one agitated and apart from. Or as Wilson uses a line in the 12 Steps to 12 Traditions, it's brilliant. It's so right on. He says that we live in a state of anxious apartness. And I don't want to be that way. So I've gotten a little better in this over the years. I'm still not as good. I'm not as good as I'd like to be. So we make amends quickly. And then what? Well, Alcoholics Anonymous has tried since day one to install a new default position within my existence. And that new default position is talked about in the fifth thing we do. And it says, and turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Now, this is really, these are all very contrary actions to my basic inclinations. Because my default position when I got here was no matter what was going on, I was turning my thoughts to me and my feelings and my life and me. And now I've conceded painfully by my own experience and over the years that selfishness and self-centeredness and the bondage of self really is the root of every problem. Chamberlain used to say there's one problem and it contains all problems, and what he would say is it's conscious and unconscious separation between me and you and me and God. But what is the factor behind all of it? It's self. The separation occurs when I get too much of me between me and you and too much of me between me and God. And so I'm trying to get a new primary purpose. My primary purpose when I got here was me. And now my primary purpose is helping others. And that's why I have to be reminded about that. I run with a pack of people that I think that we legitimately, most of the guys I sponsor and the people I run with are 5%ers. And if you don't know what a 5%er is, I heard a trustee at a general service conference give a talk and said this 35 years ago probably. He said that he believed that 5% of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous did 95% of the service and 12-step work. And then he said that of that 5%, as long as they remained one of those doers, one of those 5%, he said they never relapse. And I'll tell you, over the test of time, I've checked that out some. I go to this detox a couple times a week. I've never met anyone in there that now that they're in detox, that a whole bunch of new guys they're working with had to be notified that their sponsor was in detox. I've never seen that. I've seen guys in there that had sponsored 10, 15 people, but they hadn't really had much that was in the past. But they sponsored them in name only. They weren't active. They weren't rowing the boat anymore. And so I'm trying to develop this new default position for my chronic condition. And I love the warnings that it gives us in this part of the book, because it really shines a light on the true chronic nature of alcoholism. And earlier in the book it talks about two different types of drinkers that would easily both be considered by a doctor or a therapist or family members, both look like alcoholics. It talks about the hard problem drinker, the person who drinks habitually. The book says has the habit so badly that it's starting to impair him mentally and physically. That's problematic. It even goes to say this person could die years before their natural time. But then it says, but this person has the ability on their own, if they make up their mind, if there is a sincere, big deal reason, an arrest, threat of a divorce, threat of loss of a job or career, if a serious enough reason comes up, that person has the ability within themselves and the power within themselves to do something that I don't have the power to do. And that's to stop or moderate. I can't. I can intend to. I can do it for a little while. But eventually, because of the chronic nature of my alcoholism, I eventually can go back to it. And, it says, one of the promises of step 10 that has really meant a lot to me over the years, and it's beyond the drinking. It says that we are placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. If you have a car and you put it into neutral, you can rev the engine all you want and you don't go anywhere. It's just noise. And if I could get into a state of neutrality, not just from alcohol, I think that's a piece of it, but from life itself and from the chattering of this fear-based ego, self. What an amazing thing. In other words, this just makes a lot of noise, but it doesn't move me. And I think this has really become true for me. On a good spiritual hair day, my head can imagine problems. It can try to tell me smack about people. It can do all, but it's distant. I'm not engaged with it. It's almost like music in a doctor's office. It's just blah, 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 blah. It's nothing. Because I'm really more present here in reality, not up here. But if I get spiritually sick, which means that I'm full of self and self-centered fear, then that gets right here. And it gets right here. And that's when it has the muscle to move me. And it's all contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. This is so odd. It's not contingent on my spiritual condition. It's contingent on the maintenance. In other words, thank God I don't have to even be good at this. I just have to be a player in the game. There's Thomas Merton had a prayer that I've heard people in AA use, and it talks about how we don't even have to know what God wants for us, that we believe that our desire to find and do His will is enough for Him. That all I got to do, I don't have to be perfect here, but I have to be active here. And I have to be in the game. I have to be doing things every day to try, not perfectly, but to try to maintain my spiritual condition, which is an alignment. It's a surrender of self and an alignment with God and service and self. It's self-abandonment and service. So I like this thing about this neutrality, and I have known this, and it's beautiful. There's really I think it's taken me many, many years here to start showing up in my life like I really do trust God. And there's a tremendous security in that. To know, I mean really, really know. And the only way you really, really know something, if you're like me, is to have the experience repeatedly until it becomes your reality. To know that God's there and He's taking care of me, even when I'm imperfect, even when I screw up. I took me a long time to know that, because I thought, like a lot of us, I thought that you had to be good to merit His help. And I had a guy many years ago. He came up to me after a meeting and he said, I want you to try a little experiment mentally. He said, I want you to think. You don't have to tell me what it is, but I want you to think of the most shameful, the one thing that you've done in your life that you feel the most guilty about. And I had a couple, but okay, I got one. And I didn't even like thinking about it. And he said, now I want you to think about the nicest, kindest, most loving thing you've ever done in your life. And it was just, there was a few things, but one that popped up, I was a little kid and I had a paper route. And there was this little old man that struggled with, he was just on Social Security, that was it. And he just hard to get by. A lot of times he couldn't pay for his paper and stuff. And I didn't, I'm a paper boy, I don't make much money, but I took some money and I did something really nice for this guy. I never really talked about it much. It wasn't until I got into AA and I thought back of it, I started thinking about it, and I've shared it a couple times. And it made me feel really good. And the guy, I said, okay, I got the good one and the bad one. He said, when you understand that God loved you equally at both those moments, you'll understand what you're up against. And I'll tell you something, that was many, many years ago. My experience since then has actually taught me that he's possibly wrong. That from what I've observed in my own life and in the lives of the people I sponsor, I think maybe God loved me more at the decrepit moment than he did at the good one. I think there have been things I've done in my life because God loves me so much that I imagine in my mind that it's made him weep. And the reason I believe he maybe loved me more at the worst is because that's when you get the most help. Did you ever notice that? You really, really screw up. Did you ever notice how the help comes? It's amazing. You see God manifest itself through the people in Alcoholics Anonymous a lot. And I mean, if you're a member of AA and you're just happy all the time, well, we're glad you're here, but we're going to pretty much ignore you. I mean, no, we don't mean to, but I mean, you're fine. Good. But if you're having a tough time, oh my God, you're getting invited to more potlucks than you've ever imagined. I mean, people are circling the wagons around you. You know what I mean? It's like, and I think that's a manifestation of this. And so I am very secure in this. There's a comfort in it. But the book says it's talking about the chronic nature. It says it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. It really is. One of the things that happens here is that AA has good news and bad news. No matter where you came from, no matter how bad your life is, the good news is that in time, through the practice of the 12 steps in this process of self-abandonment and service, in time, your life's going to do very well. We don't know what that means. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be rich, but you're going to do very well and you're going to feel good. That's the good news. The bad news is that through the process of the 12 steps and the actions we take here, in time, you're going to feel good. And here's what happens to a lot of us. As I start to feel good, it doesn't feel like I'm sick anymore. And when you start to think you're not sick, it's easy to stop taking the medicine. And it's easy to stop taking the actions of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think a lot of us, and I've watched some stellar members of Alcoholics Anonymous with way deep double-digit sobriety drink again, get on drugs, or commit suicide. And at one time, they were amazing examples of AA, but they got so comfortable that they got seduced by the very fruits of their recovery into a false and erroneous sense and state of okayness. And that's crazy when you think about it. I mean, because if this is a chronic illness true to form, like all chronic illnesses, diabetes, chronic heart disease, I mean, if you went in to visit someone, a diabetic friend of yours in the hospital, and they just came out of a coma, and they were almost died, and they said to you, I don't know why I went into the coma. I have a new car. You want to slap them? I mean, just what are you talking about? But in alkalogics, crap like that makes sense to us, you know? I don't know why. I've heard people in detox say stuff like that. I don't know why I drank again. Had a big house and kids and I don't know. I was doing good. I don't know why I drank again. You drank again because you weren't treating the disease. No matter how good your life was, right? See, alcoholism doesn't care about your company and your business. Alcoholism doesn't care about your marriage or your kids. It doesn't. It doesn't. Matter of fact, if it could use these things that are blessings in your life to confuse you and pull you away, then it will have its way with you. And so, it says, if I rest on my laurels, I'm headed for trouble. For alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So every day is a day that I got to do some of this stuff. I've gotten a little more serious about 10 and 11. You know a great way to get serious about 10 and 11? Don't do it for a while. If you're sitting here, and it's almost like anything's like that. If you don't drink, the alcoholism will change, will push you. I went through a period where I wasn't really sponsored. I had a sponsor, but he'd become my best friend. We were in business together. I mean, it's like trying to be sponsored by your dad. Right? It's just, there's no accountability there. He thinks everything I do is wonderful because he loves me. And I was pretty much sponsoring myself for a number of years. And I'll tell you, that will make you sponsorable. And that's when I went and got the sponsor. It was about 22 years ago. I got the sponsor I have today. I was tired of being a loose cannon. I really, if you run your own life and you sponsor yourself for a long period of time, no matter how smart you think you are, no matter how great your intentions are, if you are like me, after a while, the wheels start, what's the book say? We make decisions. Sometimes people hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that we have made some decisions here based on self, which later placed us in these positions to be hurt. So there is a tremendous security in sponsorship. I told my sponsor 20 years ago or more, I said, listen, I want to be sponsored, and I'm going to do everything you ask me to do, but if you screw me up, I'm going to go around AA and tell everybody. And he just started laughing. Because he doesn't manage my life. He has an intuitive ability to bring the spiritual principle out of the hat that applies to the situation I'm in at the time where I can't see it because it's right here. I can't see it. When I think that you have screwed me over and I think that you owe me an amends, it doesn't occur to me that I owe you one. It doesn't occur to me to do what it says in the book and disregard what you've done entirely and really start to look where I'd been selfish in this deal, where I'd been to do my deal. I tell you, when it's right on me, I just need somebody that's objective, that's not emotionally involved, that doesn't have an ego that's vested in being right here. I need someone that's not trying to defend what I've done, that can be objective and is grounded in the principles of the program. I can't find them when I need them. I always thought that's the weird nature of trying to be God-directed, is that when you need God's direction the most is when it's unobtainable because you're so full of yourself, right? Do you ever have a really terrible situation in your life? Maybe you're going through divorce or financial difficulties or something that's really on you. Do you ever try to meditate and get inspiration from God at that time? If you can get it, you're doing better than I am. But I'll get it through you. And the great strength of Alcoholics Anonymous is that we're not all weird on the same day. And this has been, I've experienced both ends of this deal, is that I can be weird and where I feel like I can't help anybody. I got too many problems of my own. And a guy I sponsor will call me up and he'll be in distress and pain. And you'll hear a loud, as my head, as my love and concern for him pulls my head out of my butt. And then I'm able to help him. And then it might only be 10 minutes. I'm out of myself helping him. And then, of course, I'll go back into me again. And my sponsor's like that. He has spiritual objectivity. I think there's a covenant here that when two or more of us come together for the purpose of recovery, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. You feel that in meetings sometimes. Do you ever go into your home group when there's nobody there? What you feel in the buzz a minute before the meeting starts, you don't feel that one. And it's not just the people. There's something that comes here when we're here for a common purpose. It's a beautiful thing. So I'm very cautious about doing some of the, I don't want to get too far away because I've gotten too far away and I don't like it. So I try to be a little more diligent. I'm not real good with step 10. You know, one of the things that happened to me, happens to so many of us, is that we get big lives. I mean, big lives. Sometimes sometimes I want to pinch myself when I realize how I'm living and the amazing stuff that goes on. Because we have busy lives, it's easy when little things come up that really should have taken care of, it's easy to roll over it. I'll get it later, and just roll over it. And then what happens is you have an accumulation of conflict and self. And then I start getting weird. And if I don't catch it at night and when I'm starting the preparation for step 11, then it builds up. That's why I don't know, it's been a while now. Every several years, every 6-8 years, I don't know, I'll go back through the steps and do an in-depth inventory because I leak. Stuff's built up. And I know now today why that I'm sick. Because I'm fine, but you look sick. You know, right? If you look around you and everybody you see looks really cool, like they're not perfect, but they're kind of like you see yourself in them, and they're struggling like you're struggling with a lot of same stuff. You kind of feel warm towards them. You're probably in a good spot. You look around, you see a lot of selfish, self-centered people that should be straightened out. You are in trouble. And so it's time to clean house. I think before I start 11, why don't we take about an 8-minute break and we'll come back and do 11 and 12, okay?